We have an Eastern Conference champion, what the Indiana Pacers taught us about the Orlando Magic in their defeat to the Celtics, plus some new mid-tier free agency rumors, and why the answers to the Magic's problems may already be here. It's time to take a step back for Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is May 28th. It will be May 29th, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, what the Indiana Pacers lost to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals tells us about the Orlando Magic. We'll talk about why the Pacers lost that series and why it kind of proves something good about the Magic from their playoff run. We'll get to that, plus new mid-tier free agent targets to discuss, and why the Magic may already have several answers to their problems in-house. We'll get to all that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So the Boston Celtics are your Eastern Conference champions. No surprise there. They were kind of lapping the field. I don't think, as much as we would have as much as I would have loved to have spent a couple days in Boston for games 1 and 2, maybe game 5, a lot of us were not super optimistic that the Magic would be able to do much with the Celtics either. I don't know how Magic fans still feel about Boston. I'm still bitter about 2010 too, but the Celtics are worthy champions. And the way the Eastern Conference Finals went, and sweeps are never fun, but the way the Eastern Conference Finals went saw 3 games that felt very similar. And I'm recording this as the Timberwolves are playing the Mavericks. We'll talk, I think, a little bit about the Timberwolves and why they're losing their series, but it's gonna be something very similar to what we saw from Indiana. The Pacers flubbed at the end of games. There's no way about it. They had leads in the last 5 minutes of 3 of the 4 losses in the series, and the Celtics were a metronome that didn't waver, just kind of kept at their rhythm, and the Pacers were the ones going left and right and all over the place. And this is, not that the Pacers weren't capable of winning these close games, but in the playoffs, it's a different style of basketball. It's a different game. And I'm a big believer that when you get to the playoffs, you can't change who you are. You are who you are. You have to be what got you there. And you have to you trust things. You trust things, obviously, at a certain point. But you have to be what got you there. And the Pacers were fast breaking all the time, taking quick shots, high possession team. And that's fine. Like that style can win. But it leaves the door open to things that happen repeatedly against the Celtics. And the Pacers taking quick shots couldn't slow the game down, couldn't milk some clock, couldn't get quality looks and quality shots at a slower pace to bleed the Celtics dry, to bleed the Celtics out and get to the end of these games. I'm not going to blame the Pacers for doing what they did. That is who they are. I was talking to some people who were watching the playoffs, but didn't really watch a lot of Pacers, and they asked me, do the Pacers usually play this fast? Like, is this pace normal for the Pacers? I'm like, yeah, this is how they play. This is what they do. You're not changing that at this point in the playoffs, certainly not this deep in the playoffs. And obviously, Indiana made the conference finals. They made the championship of the in-season tournament. The Pacers have something that works. But I would argue the reason why Indiana wasn't more competitive in their conference finals series is they met a team that could match their pace and then slow it down and control as well. And this gets me to something about the Magic that I think is a positive. The Magic and the way that they play and the way that certainly Paolo Banchero is comfortable playing, that's a style of play that will work in the playoffs. At the end of the day, like, I hate that we put so much emphasis on the playoffs and don't value the season as a whole, but at the end of the day, the Larry O'Brien trophy is given out for the playoffs. It's important. To be able to play and succeed in the playoffs is important. Now, when we look back at the Magic's playoff series against the Cavs, we could say a lot of things. We could say a lot of things about it. We could say that the Magic overachieved. And honestly, we could say that the Magic overachieved because they were comfortable at a slower pace. They thrived in an environment where their defense could dictate the terms, where they could play a half-court game. And even if their offense wasn't chugging, as long as they were preventing Cleveland from running, they were in good shape. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the team with more fast break points won 5 of the 7 games in the series. Fast break points was actually a pretty good indicator of who was winning the basketball game. And when you're playing against 2 really good defenses like Orlando and Cleveland had, your ability to get out in transition and beat that defense before it could get set is a key marker. It was a huge factor in that series. But it's not everything. And obviously, you're only going to get so many fast break opportunities in a game. And that, I think, is the roadblock the Pacers ran into. They were able to get by, obviously. They were able to succeed. They won 2 playoff series. But at a certain point, you've got to be able to execute in the half court. And Paolo Banchero said it after the series. The playoffs were really to his liking. The pace of the games, the intensity of the games, the way everything just kind of slows down and grinds you a little bit. Paolo Banchero said he loved it. He thrived in that environment. And this Magic team as a whole thrived in that environment. I would say this. If Orlando was more experienced, they would have come out better in games 1 and 2. They would have won game 5, and we'd be talking about the team going to the second round. A more experienced team wins that series. No offense to Cleveland. They won the series. They earned it. I'm not sitting here saying otherwise. A more experienced team from Orlando wins that series. I had so many people from the Cavs say the Magic had the exact playoff series the Cavs wanted last year. A competitive series where you learn a lot, take some bumps, take some scars like we talked about earlier. That's what the Magic got. The Magic got what they needed out of their playoff experience. But they also, in my opinion, got proof of concept. In my opinion, they got a sample size, a feeling of, what we're doing, what we're building, the way that we play our defense, our offense, it works. Now the trick is the Magic begin to develop and grow is, okay, how do we get it? We have really good breaking ball. How do we get a fastball? How do we speed ourselves up? How do we get into our sets faster? How do we become more efficient? How do we expand our efficiency? And honestly, that's a lot of what we're talking about this summer. Is, okay, let's get a point guard to manage this team. Let's get some shooting to spread the floor. That's the game here. But the Magic do have a style that elevates this team in the playoffs. They have a player who is comfortable doing the things and playing at the pace the playoffs prefer. And that to me is a big lesson. Not that the Pacers aren't good. The Pacers are capable. But at the highest levels, they had one way to play. And when they got put under pressure, that way failed them. Because they were taking quick shots. They were letting Boston back into games. They were making critical mistakes down the stretch. And Boston made them pay for every single one of them. That's the ball game. It's like we said throughout the entire playoff series, like we said throughout the entire season, like we will say forever now. The margin for error in the playoffs is very, very small. The difference between winning and losing a game is an Evan Mobley block or a Paolo Banchero and one or Sam Merrill 3 at the end of the second quarter. It's very, very fine things. It's not always the big thing. But you got to ask yourself why you're in these close games. And when stuff repeatedly happens, how do you fix it? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say the Magic should play at the slowest pace in the league. No, they actually need to pick up their pace a little bit. Not necessarily in the number of possessions, but how quickly they run through things. And again, I think Cleveland did a really good job switching and bottling up those initial actions, and the Magic didn't really have anywhere else to go. So diversity of attack is going to be really important for this Magic team to develop. That's one of the things we learned from the playoffs. But overall, this Magic team is built for it. Perhaps in a way that the Pacers aren't at the highest levels. I think this Magic team, when they get to a conference finals, when they get to a second round, it's going to be exactly like what this year's playoffs were. There might be some shock from the inexperience, but they're going to respond and play and look very comfortable with it. We're catching up on news around the league. A couple of rumors talking about mid-tier free agents. We're going to draw this microscope back from the big guns and talk about some role players the Magic might be looking to add. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word from our friends over at Gametime. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. And look, you've got a week to get them. Thursday, June 6th is the opening of the NBA Finals. We got a long way to go before the finals open up in Boston. So if you're trying to get to the game, Gametime is the place to go. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. There's some major events coming up here in Orlando. It is the summer of soccer in Orlando. Orlando City, the 8-game win streak, not unbeaten streak. First place in the NWSL, Orlando Pride. I always believed in the Orlando Pride. Plus, the Continental Classico between the U.S. and Brazil, all coming up in June. If you want to be at pitch level for any of these events, Gametime is your place to go. Save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're going to this summer. You can even save more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, and zone deals help you save even more when choosing a section and letting Gametime choose the seats for you. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals or whatever you're interested in tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic part of your day. Every day, if you're like me and you work from home, you usually have some sports thing on TV or in the background. If you want the best sports news, the best sports analysis, don't go to the national networks. They're just kind of touch and go. They don't know what's going on. Go to the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel to get analysis on the biggest news in sports from local experts who know their team best. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, we've obviously been talking kind of big picture stuff. We had the last 3 episodes with Keith Smith. Again, thanks to Keith Smith of Spot Track for jumping on the show. If you missed any of those episodes, last 3 episodes in our archives, go download them, go listen. Pretty lengthy conversation. We split it up into 3 parts, obviously. But good stuff trying to get you set for the off season as a whole. A lot of the focus for a lot of fans has been on some of the big names. Those $25 million a year guys, Malik Monk, D'Angelo Russell, Tyus Jones, Paul George, Klay Thompson. On the trade front, Anthony Simons, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, the big names in free agency. And the Magic are expected to make a major push. We are expecting that the Magic will go after a starting guard to supplement their roster, to add to their roster. We are indeed expecting that. And it feels almost a necessity because it's not likely Gary Harris is coming back. And with all the money the Magic have to spend, the Magic do need to spend it, do need to be aggressive. But as I've said, my ideal summer is not to spend all that on one player. I don't see the Magic throwing $35 million at Klay Thompson or Paul George. I don't think that's what they want to do. Now, they may do that. I'm not going to pretend like that's off the table, but that's my suspicion. That is not the direction the Magic are headed. That would be my suspicion. The way I have this summer mapped out is I do think the Magic, they have about $32 million in cap room. I think that they will, if they're doing what I think they're going to do, that does probably mean they're going to decline the team option on Joe Ingles to get that number up to about $44 million. I think they will spend about $25 million of that on a starting guard. I think then they will spend the next part of that on a third center to replace Goga Bitadze, and then probably a backup wing or just add some depth. So I see this team adding 3 players to the roster. As Keith Smith said, there's a possibility the Magic decline the option on Mo Wagner, but bring him back under the room exception, which is about $8 million. So no change in salary there. So you spend 25 on one guy, and then they have bird rights on him. So that's not a problem, even under the room exception. But you have a big free agent and then maybe 2 small free agents at like the $10, $12 million range. Who those players are, though, is still kind of tough to figure out. And maybe we haven't dove deep enough into those players. But we did get a pair of reports suggesting the Magic might be standing in here. Kelly Iko of The Athletic, and I think we talked about this earlier now that I'm mentioning it, but I'm going to mention it here. Kelly Iko, the Houston Rockets reporter for The Athletic, had a bunch of free agency notes about the Rockets, among many things that they're monitoring what's going on with Donovan Mitchell. But he added, the Rockets appear to be targeting Milwaukee Bucks forward Malik Beasley to add some spacing, and adds that among the teams interested in the Florida State guard are the Orlando Magic and the Golden State Warriors. Malik Beasley is a player who had a really solid year, kind of a late summer addition to the Bucks, but had a really solid year last year, averaging 11.3 points per game, making 41.3% of his 6.9 3-point attempts per game. A really solid outing, a really solid showing from Beasley. And he's been a pretty consistent shooter, a career 38.5% 3-point shooter. He shot 44.4% on catch and shoot 3-pointers and 38.7% on pull-up 3-pointers. I actually think that's a really important stat too. The Magic just need more volume. Malik Beasley's been in this league for a little while now. He is a decent defender, but more than anything else, he is an excellent 3-point shooter. He's an excellent floor spacer. He always has been. He's had some spurty games, but he is a reliable 3-point shooter. And again, that's what the Magic need. And he is a starting level player. Started 77 of 79 games that he played in for the Bucks last year. Very, very capable of being a starter. They had a good defender. Bucks had a 112.6 defensive rating with Beasley on the floor compared to 115 with him off. So he was involved in good defensive lineups, and 112.6 is pretty solid. So he's definitely he is not going to, I don't know if he will get $20 million a year. I'd say I'd put him in that 15 to 18 range, but he's a guy that's going to have a market. He had a really good year in Milwaukee, a player that can add. The newest rumor, and it's not so much a rumor, but it's more of a connected to, is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as a potential landing spot. Everyone is expecting Caldwell-Pope to decline his player option with the Nuggets, looking to cash in and get a bit of a pay raise. The Nuggets do have bird rights that you can grab him. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Magic ultimately do or whether the Magic go after a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He brings, I'm big on the Horace Grant theory. Bringing in players with championship experience to a young team especially is a good thing. And KCP is really good and a really solid defender and a really solid player. Averaged 10.1 points per game, shot 40.6% from three on 4.1 three-point attempts per game last year, added 2.4 assists per game. Not bad for kind of not bad for a guy who is essentially exclusively a shooter. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, just for the reference here, is probably going to opt out to get a bigger salary. He will be opting out of $15.4 million. So if you want to get him, he will definitely cost you $20 million a year. So, you're looking at a 3-year, $60 million deal probably. And I had some people ask me, like, would you give a guy a three-year deal or not? I would say yes for bird rights purposes. Just get that 3-year deal. Get the guy, get the bird rights. I think that's probably the smartest thing to do unless you're not sold on someone, which if you're not sold on someone, why are you signing them? The Magic need some depth, no doubt about it. And while they did have the 4th highest scoring bench in the league, the Magic's bench didn't really show up in the playoffs. Cole Anthony struggled, obviously. Jonathan Isaac was up and down. Mo Wagner had a really strong start, but petered out toward the end of the playoffs. And I think a lot of it is Franz was up and down too, and he didn't play. He had some good moments in the playoffs, but also some really frustrating moments. The Magic, I think, need a more dynamic attack off their bench. And so, obviously these players are starting level players. KCP started for a championship team. Malik Beasley started for a championship team, or started for a championship level team. Are they the starters that the Magic need? No, because they need playmaking. I like maybe Jalen Suggs is still a capable kind of stand-in for a point guard. He really didn't show that this year. It's still a struggle for him knowing when to drive and how to pass and how to be a better distributor. Turnovers were his big problem. And we'll talk about the Magic's offense because I looked up some numbers and there's a lot of things the Magic can do, just them, to improve their offense. And one of those things is turnovers. They were 28th in the league or 26th in the league in bottom 5 in the league in turnover rate at 15%. That's just an area they've got to be better at. So these are mid-tier free agents, but they're starting level free agents. So they're going to get paid starter money. And, it's going to be tough to squeeze them into what the Magic are trying to do. But obviously the shooting fits. And a lot of this right now is professional dot connecting. I hate to say it. It is a lot of professional dot connecting right now. But the Magic obviously have a lot of options. The one option, though, we haven't talked much about is what they have in reserve. Some of the answers to these difficult questions the Magic have might already be on the roster. We'll talk about the rookies and the season they had coming up here in just a moment. So I've mentioned this throughout this run up to the summer, throughout this run up to the offseason, that a lot of what Jeff Weltman and his staff are having to evaluate at this juncture is how much do we have, or what, for the things that we need, how much can we improve internally, and what do we need to externally bring into the fold? This is the question. Like, if you believe the Magic have a rim protection issue, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm 50-50 on that. I'll just say that. But if you believe the Magic have a rim protection problem, the question that Jeff Weltman and his staff have to ask is, can Wendell Carter bounce back from a really poor season this year, frankly, and have a better season next year and provide that rim protection? Or is that something we need to add externally? A lot of us think that the point guard position, I would argue point guard is the biggest need for the Magic this offseason. The Magic do probably need to add that externally. Playmaking, they need to add that externally. 3-point shooting. Jeff Weltman seemed to hint at exit interviews that he's not as concerned about the shooting as everyone else might be. He finished 15th in the league after January 1st in 3-point field goal percentage. I would say yes, that is something the Magic need to improve on. And while internal development will help make that better. So too would adding an actual gravity shooter and a volume shooter at that. But the Magic have two pieces in reserve here that could very well change the trajectory of things. And how much the Magic believe in those two players and their ability to contribute next season could inform a lot more about this summer than a lot of us think, and a lot of us are planning. I am, of course, talking about Anthony Black and Jet Howard. The Magic had two rookies who played pretty sparingly in their rookie seasons that do provide a lot of the needs the Magic are looking for. Anthony Black came in, was excellent defensively, fit this culture perfectly. He had a really strong start to the season when he was pressed into duty. Really improved as a shooter as the season went on. Like his improvement as a shooter was one of the most impressive things about the season. Him being a near 40% three-point shooter was just stunning. And I cannot wait for Summer League to see just how much further he's grown as a shooter. But he's a natural point guard. Everyone believed that he would be a playmaker, be someone who could get downhill, be someone who could create for others. But he didn't really play point guard his rookie year. Magic kind of took the ball out of his hands, made him a standstill corner shooter, made him a slasher. They didn't put the ball in his hands and trust him to be a point guard. And that's why that point guard need feels so big. But maybe Anthony Black's that guy. Maybe the Magic weren't ready to turn him loose his rookie year, but next year, maybe they will be. We talk about three-point shooting and volume three-point shooting. That was something we all understood was a need on draft night. I said it a million times last year ahead of the draft, that if the Magic don't exit draft night, whether by trade or by draft, with a shooter, I would be very disappointed. None of us really had Jet Howard on our board, but Jet Howard was a shooter. We all understood he was a shooter. And so the Magic accomplished that goal only to keep Jet Howard in the G League. And look, that's not the end of the world. I've had a lot of Magic fans say, see, this is why we should have drafted Derek Lively or whatever the case may be. And I'd be like, guys, like, calm down. You don't draft a player for their rookie year. And we're seeing this more and more. Teams are parking their rookies in the G League and giving them that extra year to develop and that extra year to grow. And Jet had a very strong campaign in the G League. He shot the ball very, very well, looked to be a little bit more improved defensively, looked to be a better playmaker, which is, I think, ultimately what the Magic envisioned for him and why they picked him over some of the other players that were available in that draft. Jet Howard had a strong year. But now we got to see him do it in the NBA. And if you're the Magic, how much are you willing to risk that he's ready? How much are you willing to bet that he's ready? Are you not going to hedge your bet and bring in a shooter to compete for that role and compete for that spot? You're going to need everybody on your roster at some point during the season. We all know that. But here's my thing. Whatever the Magic do this offseason, they have to create the space for both of these players to have a path to minutes, to have a path to compete for playing time. Whether that's Anthony Black filling in for the Markelle Fultz role. We're expecting the Magic to let Markelle Fultz walk in free agency. Anthony Black should slot in and fill those minutes. I am very comfortable with him playing that role that Markelle Fultz played last year. Jet Howard could very easily fill in either the Caleb Houston minutes and the Caleb Houston role or the Joe Ingles minutes. And so there are, two guys that you're letting go. And now all you have to do is fill in for Gary Harris and then look for ways to improve the roster elsewhere. What the Magic ultimately do and how they set their roster up and the trades that they make, that does in a lot of ways depend on what they believe these two young players are capable of doing. That is a big piece of the puzzle for the Orlando Magic. That is a big piece of what the Magic are going to try and accomplish this summer. But both of these players, as we look at what the Magic need, three-point shooting, playmaking, secondary creation, These two players fill and fit a lot of needs the Magic already have and a lot of needs the Magic already know. And so the answers to a lot of our questions may already be in-house. But we will see. They need the opportunity first, and the Magic have to either trust them or not. But the answers may already be there for a lot of our questions. We're going to answer a lot more of those questions, actually. On tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to do our draft Tuesday on a Thursday and talk about how the Magic address their needs in the NBA draft. Talk about some prospects that fill some clear needs and whether the Magic are worth taking them at 19. We'll get to that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. You, of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places on podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. You can, of course, find us on YouTube. Search for Locked On Magic. And for the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. For even more Orlando Magic content, I'm starting player evaluations. You can find that at the Orlando Magic Hub, my Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. And as always, thank you for your support. Now that you're done listening to me, be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Day 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Day now available on the free Fire TV channels app. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. For Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.